The Dancing with Depression podcast is brought to you by CAS-CM, where CM stands for Content Matters, because content brings people together. What does support mean to you? Do you feel supported now? Welcome to the Dancing with Depression podcast. I'm your host, Adam Turner. I was recently talking with someone, and in conversation, I happened to mention something about the podcast that one of my closest friends, someone that I've known for over 40 years, had never listened to an episode of the podcast. Looking back, that was, at the time, 25 plus episodes had been published over a 2-year period. And it was strange because the person I was talking with kind of felt the need to offer an apology, like, I'm sorry to hear that. And I was taken back because I didn't feel an apology was necessary. And I wouldn't say I laughed, but I kind of chuckled a little bit. And that kind of threw them off a little bit as well. And so they, of course, inquired, like, what caused me to react that way? And I was just very genuine and honest. And I was like, I hope he never listens to an episode. That one threw them for a loop, and their facial expression really was kind of between confusion and disbelief. That more people would have leaned more towards, why are you okay with someone not supporting you and listening to the podcast? And so I had to explain it a little bit more because obviously they only knew the part of my close friend not listening to the podcast, but didn't really know the entire story. And so what I mean by that is my friend that I'm referring to has been one of my biggest, probably top 3 supporters in everything that I've done, podcast included. He has not listened to an episode, and I don't need or desire that kind of support, meaning it's not that it wouldn't be genuine, but he supports me in different ways. And that's kind of what we're going to allude to about what support is, what it means to different people, and is it fair to ask one person to support literally everything you do? So my friend that I'm referring to also was instrumental when I was going through the bankruptcy that I referenced back in I think it was my late 20s, early 30s. He didn't judge me. He didn't make me feel small. He shared financial knowledge that he had, helping me understand money in a way that I had not truly understood it before. He offered guidance. He showed up. Looking back, I honestly don't know if I'd be where I am today without that support. So when somebody says, I'm sorry he doesn't support your podcast, I don't hear that. I hear someone who supported me when it mattered most in a way that he was truly supportive, not forced and not trying to overextend. To some people, support meant listening to the podcast. To me, support meant helping someone rebuild their life. Neither definition is wrong, they're just different. And so made me wonder, how often do we confuse support with our expectations of support? Because if 10 people define support 10 different ways, how many unnecessary disappointments are we creating simply because we never stop to ask what support actually looks like to us? That question completely changed the direction of my thinking. When we hear the word support, many of us assume we know exactly what it means. But do we? If I asked 10 people to define support, I honestly think I'd get 10 different answers. Some would say listening. Others might say it's showing up. Someone else would say it's giving advice. Another person might believe it's encouraging someone, helping someone financially, being present, sharing knowledge, praying, checking in, celebrating victories. You get the point. Sitting quietly beside someone who doesn't have the words. None of these examples are wrong, but here's what I think happens far more often than we realize. We assume everyone else shares our definition. We expect people to support us the way we would support someone else. And when they don't, we sometimes conclude they don't care. They aren't supportive. They've changed. But maybe they're supporting us the only way they know how. Or maybe they're supporting us in ways we've completely overlooked because we were expecting something different. That shift in perspective led me to another realization. Support isn't one thing. As I thought back over my life, I realized I've needed different kinds of support at different times. As mentioned, when I went through bankruptcy, I didn't need emotional advice. I needed financial guidance. My friend wasn't helpful because he'd experienced bankruptcy himself. He was helpful because he understood money and he shared his knowledge with me. That was the support I needed. Now, other times in my life, I've needed emotional support. He, along with Bobby and my parents and my brother, have certainly provided that for me. Just someone willing to sit in the discomfort with me was support that I needed at that time. Sometimes support looks like information, helping me understand options I didn't know I had. Sometimes it's been peer support. There's something incredibly powerful about hearing another person say, I've been there. Not because it solves the problem, but because it reminds you that you're not walking through it alone. And maybe that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. Different situations require different kinds of support, which raises another question. How often do we expect one person, one spouse, one friend, one parent to provide every kind of support we'll ever need? Financial, emotional, practical, spiritual, professional, encouragement, advice, presence. That's a heavy expectation for one person to carry. And maybe that's where things begin to get complicated. Because understanding that support comes in different forms is one thing. Understanding what kind of support we need in a particular moment, that's something entirely different. And I think that's where the next part of this conversation begins. As I kept thinking about support, I realized something else. One of the hardest questions I've ever had to answer wasn't, do I need support? It was, what kind of support do you need right now? Thinking about it, have you ever told someone, I'm really struggling? What happened next? One friend immediately started giving advice. Another person simply listened. Someone else tried to encourage me. Someone tried to distract me. Someone started trying to solve the problem. None of them were wrong. They were simply supporting me the way they knew how. Here's the challenge. Only one of those responses may have been what I needed. Sometimes we're disappointed not because support wasn't offered. We're disappointed because the support offered wasn't the support we were looking for. And here's where I think many of us, including myself, get stuck. People aren't mind readers. We often expect people to support us the ways we want to be supported without ever communicating what that looks like. Think about how often we say, I just need some support. Support for what? Do I need advice? Do I need somebody to just listen? Do I need perspective? Do I need someone to simply tell me, you're going to get through this? The clearer we become about what we need, the easier it becomes for someone else to support us. But that's only one side of the equation. Because while we're figuring out what we need, someone else is trying to figure out how to help. Imagine someone you care about coming to you and says, I'm struggling. Well, now what? Do you listen? Do you offer advice? Do you try to fix it? Do you stay quiet? Do you encourage them? Do you give them space? There isn't a handbook. Most supporters aren't professionals. There are spouses, our parents, our friends, coworkers, neighbors. They're people who care. They're trying to help someone they love. And if you've ever been in that position, you know how difficult it can be because every decision feels important. If you give advice, were you supposed to listen? If you listen, should you have spoken up? If you say too much, did you make it worse? If you say too little, did you abandon them? Most supporters aren't trying to fail. They're trying to help. They're simply guessing. And sometimes the people trying the hardest to help are carrying weight they rarely talk about. During my own journey with depression, Bobby carried and still carries a weight that isn't hers. She couldn't make my depression disappear. She can't think of my thoughts for me. She can't attend therapy for me. At the end of the day, she can't heal me. But she also couldn't simply ignore what I was going through. Imagine loving someone deeply, watching them struggle, knowing they're hurting, and realizing there isn't a magic sentence that's going to fix it. That's heavy. Over time, supporting someone through a difficult season can become exhausting. Not because you stop loving them, but because you care so much. There are a few terms for this: compassion fatigue, emotional exhaustion, and I think the one we're most familiar with, just flat out burnt out. Eventually, supporters begin asking themselves questions too. Am I helping? Am I making things worse? What else can I do? How much longer can I keep carrying this? We spend a lot of time talking about the person who's struggling, and rightfully so, but we don't spend nearly enough time talking about the people standing beside them. Who supports the supporter? Who's checking on them? Who's giving them permission to rest? Because if we expect one person to carry every emotional need we have, eventually everyone loses. Which led me to another realization. Maybe the goal was never to find one person who could meet every need. Maybe the goal is something much bigger. Think about your own life. If you have a medical concern, you probably don't rely on one doctor for everything. If you have financial questions, you might seek someone who understands finances. You don't necessarily want to get advice from your cousin who is in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. If your car breaks down, call a mechanic. Different people, different expertise. So why do we expect one person, usually the person closest to us, to be our therapist, our coach, our financial advisor, our best friend, our motivator, our problem solver, our emotional support? And somehow we don't expect them to become overwhelmed? Maybe that's why support systems are so important. Not because any one person isn't enough, but because no one person was ever designed to be everything. A therapist offers something different than a spouse. A friend offers something different than a support group. A mentor offers something different than a family member. Each relationship brings something unique. And together, those relationships create something much stronger than any one person ever could. Maybe the healthiest support system isn't built around finding one person who can carry everything. Maybe it's built around recognizing the strengths different people bring into our lives and allowing each of them to contribute in their own way. Which brings me back to where this conversation began. If support can look so different from one person to the next, then maybe another question deserves our attention. How do we know when someone isn't being supportive or simply supporting us differently than we expected? As I reflected on all of this, I found myself coming back to where this conversation started. My friend, my long-term friend, the one who's never listened to an episode of this podcast. At first glance, someone might say, well, that's not very supportive. But is it? Does someone have to participate in everything we do to support us? Think about it. Have you ever had someone who didn't attend your fundraiser, but was there for you when your world fell apart? Someone who never watched your kid play sports, but answered the phone every single time you called? Someone who never bought your product, but believed in you before anyone else did? Support and participation often overlap, but they aren't the same thing. Someone can participate without being supportive, and someone can be incredibly supportive without participating. The absence of participation isn't always the absence of support. And I think that's an important distinction, because when we confuse the two, we risk overlooking the people who have quietly been showing up for us all along. As I continued thinking about support, I realized it's just as important to understand what support isn't. Support isn't mind reading. Support isn't fixing every problem. Support isn't controlling someone's decisions. Support isn't always agreeing. Support isn't rescuing someone from every difficult situation. And support certainly isn't sacrificing your own well-being until there's nothing left to give. Support doesn't mean taking responsibility for someone else's healing. Every one of us has work that only we can do. No friend, no spouse, no parent, no therapist can do that work for us. They can walk beside us. They can encourage us. They can remind us we're not alone. But they cannot take the journey for us. Maybe that's why support is so powerful. Not because it removes our struggles, but because it reminds us we don't have to face them alone. So after thinking about all of this, I don't think my definition of support has changed. I think it's become bigger. Today, I see support less as something people owe us and more as something we learn to recognize. Sometimes support sounds like advice. Sometimes it sounds like silence. Sometimes it's a hug. Sometimes it's accountability. And sometimes it's someone saying, I'm here if you need me. And sometimes support is someone helping you rebuild your life, even if they never listen to a single episode of your podcast about how you dance with depression. Maybe before we say they weren't supportive, we should ask ourselves, did they support me in a way I wasn't expecting? Maybe before we're disappointed by what someone didn't do, we should pause long enough to recognize everything they already have. And maybe, just maybe, support isn't about finding one person who can meet every need we'll ever have. Maybe it's about building a community of people, each bringing something different, each helping carry a piece of the load. Before we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with 2 questions to think about this week. The first, when you say, I need support, do you know what kind of support you're actually asking for? And the second, who in your life has been supporting you in ways you've never stopped to recognize because it didn't look the way you expected? I have a feeling that if we answered those 2 questions honestly, some conversations would change. Some relationships will grow stronger. And some people who have quietly been showing up for us all along would finally know just how much they've meant. I'd like to take a moment to thank you for the support you have given to the Dancing with Depression podcast. It is appreciated and it is making a difference. Every episode, I ask for your continued support by liking, sharing, and commenting. Together, we are making a difference. And a friendly reminder, when it comes to support, remember to take the lead. Ever heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child? Well, same applies here. It takes an awesome audience like you to help get this message in front of someone who needs to hear they're not alone. That's why I ask for your continued support. Whether you like, share, follow, or leave a review, and if so inclined, can donate, it all helps more than you know. If something resonated, pass it along. You never know who needs it. Want to connect? Email me anytime. dancingwithdepression@yahoo.com. And remember, when it comes to depression, take the lead. Content and safety notice. Dancing with Depression may include discussions of suicide, self-harm, trauma, and emotional distress. Listeners' discretion advised. This podcast shares personal experiences and is not a substitute for professional mental health care. If you need immediate support, call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. For non-crisis help and resources, contact NAMI at 1-800-950-6264.